can't do a cartwheel, but gosh darn it, I'm a cheerleader. And so it is no surprise that I moved to Cleveland and became a cheerleader. And it's no surprise then that I went on and am now a coach, and that is my whole job. So what I want us to talk about today is this thing of purpose, and why it matters, and what is each and every one of your purpose, right? How do you find it, and how do we go after it, okay? And how do we do that? So we won't have time to get into this intricate process that I have developed, but we're going to talk about a couple of things. So the first is, if I knew I was a cheerleader, what happened? Why didn't it go my way? I came up against some sort of obstacle, right? I couldn't do the cartwheel. I couldn't do the splits. So what happens is, when we were little kids, we knew what our purpose was. We didn't have to go search for it and read the whole section in Barnes & Noble about self-help. You didn't have to pay me. We just knew it because we were doing it. So lesson number one in purpose is that purpose is not something that we go find. Purpose is already in us. Purpose is already in us. It is the way in which we are already impacting the world. It is the way we treat our friends. It is the way we treat our family. It is the way in which you do your work, regardless of what that work is. Because anyone who's friends with me can say, I'm a cheerleader. It's what I do. Anyone I date, my boyfriend will tell you, that's who I am. I do that no matter what. So it doesn't matter what the title is or what the noun is that I'm going to get into, it's that that's who I am. But what happens throughout life, folks, and I've talked to a few of you about this already today, is that who we are gets covered up, right? It gets covered up by all sorts of society expectations. For me, it was good-looking husband, and he should be a lawyer, and this is how to make money, and you can't do that because you can't do the split, and da-da-da-da-da. So what happens is, our core being, our core purpose gets covered. Until we're at the point where we don't know who we are anymore, and we don't know our purpose anymore, and all we can do is think up here, because here is covered. So we're just totally in our heads, well, who am I? What am I all about? What am I supposed to be doing? And whenever we get too much up here, usually it leads us astray, which I know is what Toshiba Bob was trying to say earlier, right? So lesson number one, again, we do not go find our purpose, we uncover it. And the way we uncover it is we begin by asking ourselves different questions. So, how many of you have kids in the room? Okay, so I'll go ahead. You're right up here with me. Mary, yeah. When you had, do you have a son, a daughter?
A son and a daughter.
A son and a daughter. And let's say when your son, what's his name?
Jim.
Let's say when Jim was about 8 or 10 years old. An adult would come up to Jim, try and make conversation, and say, Jim, what do you want to
Be when you grow up.
What do you want to be when you grow up? How many of us are guilty of saying that to little kids? Come on, folks, raise your hand. I know a lot more of you have said that to little kids. What does that say to that little kid?
Make a decision now.
Make a decision now. And by the way, what nouns do little kids know for careers? Fireman. Teacher.
Ballerina.
Doctor, ballerina, princess, cheerleader. Okay. Little kids know a handful of nouns. They do not know the full range of work that exists in this room. So there's no way the little kid can know it because we're asking them at a young age. The other thing it says to them, folks, is you have to be something else when you grow up.
Something is expected of you.
Something is expected of you, and you are not okay as you are. You have to become something when you grow up. And that starts to get all sorts of confusing. And suddenly we put a little kid in, well, I don't know, what do I want to be? Maybe I want to be this, maybe I want to be that. So what we need to do is start changing the conversation. I call this the theory of the nouns. Your purpose is not a noun. Your purpose is not architect, it is not coach, it is not writer, it is not father, it is not mother. Your purpose is the way in which you impact the world, and you impact every single one of those relationships, usually along the same way, usually in some sort of path, because that's your gift that you're giving to the world. So the way we need to think about purpose is that purpose is an action. It is how we are. Okay, it is who we are. So we've got to get rid of the noun. And the next time you see a little kid, do not ask that child, what do you want to be when you grow up? Ask that child, what do you love to do? What gets you excited? When do you have the most fun? Martha Beck. She's Oprah's life coach. And she says, we should all work like a dog. Because have you ever seen a dog work? Right? I have a dog. I throw the ball. Because it gets it. It doesn't look like work to him. It looks like what? Fun. It looks like play. Work should feel like play. So what we each need to do is to stop going to find our purpose out there. We need to start looking in here, and what it looks like is beginning to ask ourselves too, when am I the happiest? When do I have the most fun? So if you have a piece of paper, here's an exercise I love to do with my coaching clients. Grab it and answer the end of this statement. I love me when, ... I love me when. And at the end of that sentence, say, when I'm in nature. I love me when I'm talking to Herb. I love me when I'm up speaking in front of people. I love me when I'm teaching. I love me when I'm sitting at a coffee shop writing. I love me when. Another exercise I do with clients after we get to my love me whens is to then say, when have you really loved yourself? When is an exact situation? I want a real example where you made an impact. I felt so good about it. I call those peak experiences. Peak experiences, according to Maslow, was when we have a transcendent experience, when we are in absolute awe. Anyone who has had an experience where you've done something, not the kind of accomplishment that maybe your job gave you a raise for, the kind of accomplishment you got an award around your neck. I'm talking about the kind of accomplishment, the kind of achievement where you feel like, I walked someone across the street and I felt amazing. And we each have a few of these in our lives that really stand out. I was talking to a client just this weekend whose parents told her, bless their hearts, they meant no harm by it, you need to be an engineer. Because they were all engineers. And that's how you make money in this world, is to be an engineer. So she's gone ahead, and she has this career, and she's miserable. And everything now in her life is miserable. She can't keep a relationship, everything is miserable. She hates where she lives, she hates. By doing this exercise, what we found is that the happiest moments in her life all centered around creativity, all centered around creating events, doing things that were artistic. So we know what our purpose is. We just have to uncover it. So peak experiences. So stop going to find it, start uncovering it. Okay? What happens sometimes is people go, great, I know my purpose. So I said, great, I'm a cheerleader. How do I make money doing that? Rent in New York is kind of expensive. I still have a condo here, it's not cheap either, right? Okay, so we have to somehow, people then, okay, great, I'm going to go. But now what? Now what? And that's when a whole new set of fears comes in. How am I going to make money? What am I going to do? And we get right back up here. Right back up here. So I knew that my purpose on this earth was to help other people find theirs, cheerlead them to go get it. And I was doing that in a way because I was doing that with Cleveland, but I got to a point where I was ready for the next. I was ready. I knew that I now needed to start doing this with individuals. I needed to solely be talking about purpose and not just about Cleveland anymore. But I didn't know how I was going to get there. And I got myself back into the same miserable tailspin that I had been in before I found purpose. In fact, I ended up with shingles when I was 34. And one of the things I know now about purpose, because I've now done the research on purpose, is that purpose is the single biggest predictor of life satisfaction, people who are living their higher purpose, okay? People who are living what they feel is purposeful, okay? People who are living a higher purpose have greater physical health, have greater mental health, okay? Higher self-esteem. Because what happens is, when we are not living our purpose, so I knew what my purpose was, but I didn't know how to go after it, so I ended up miserable and in my own head. And we know what happens in our head when we are anxious, nervous, any sort of negative thought, any sort of negativity. Here's where the science comes in. What literally happens in your brain is that it narrows. Anyone ever heard about the reptilian brain and what happens when you have negative thinking? So we know evolutionarily why we have negative thinking. We have negative thinking for one reason, and that is for survival. Okay? At the deepest part of your brain is what, it's not the scientific term, I know we have someone who really knows brains in this room. It is, I'll give it to you from the 100,000 foot term. The reptilian brain is at the deepest base of your brain, okay, and it is the most developed part of your brain. And it is the part of your brain that is responsible for survival. Survival leads to 4 F's of life. What are the 4 F's of survival? Fight, flight, not freeze, fight, flight, food, and reproduction. Okay, so those are the 4 F's of survival. And so your lowest brain, I have a new client who's like, his whole thing is about that he can't get a relationship, and I told him that, and I'm like, that's where your only one is, your whole life right now is you're just all about that last F right now, okay? We gotta get you off of that. So your whole life, that's all, when you're thinking from there, and that's why the minute someone cuts you off in traffic, or the minute someone upsets you, or the minute you can't figure out what your purpose in life is, you go into this reptilian brain, and the reptilian brain is very narrow. It narrows your thinking so you can make a very clear decision, fight, flight, okay? And that's great when you've got adrenaline, you've got to make a quick decision. But that does not help us find purpose. Rather, when I gave you the exercise of I love me when, how many of you did one? How about you? How did it feel to write down something? It feels great, right? So that now you start to feel joy. Now you start to feel inspired. Now you start to feel hope. So we understand now scientifically why we have positive emotion. This is very new. Only in the last dozen years have we scientifically understood this. Where negative emotions narrow our thinking, positive emotions open us up. Different parts of our brain go off when we feel joy, inspiration, hope. The primary researcher on this is Barb Fredrickson in North Carolina. She did begin her research at the University of Michigan, I have to tell you. And what has been found when we induce someone with positive emotion, meaning they watch a funny video or we give them a gift, and then they go into an MRI, is that different parts of their brain start going off. And those are the parts of their brain, those are the parts of our brain that are responsible for creativity, responsible for trust and relationships. So scientifically we know that we need positive emotions in order to build bonds, in order to be more creative. So instead of searching, we just start getting curious, start getting hope. So when I was in that very negative place, back there, I don't know how to search for purpose. One other thing I will mention, we also know that people who feel like they have higher purpose, not everyone does, people who feel like they have higher purpose, but they don't know what it is or how to go after it, those people are among our highest suicide rates in our world. And the reason is that you feel like there's this thing you're supposed to do, but you don't know how to do it, and it's so miserable that it leads a lot of people to severe depression and suicide.